Hi, welcome to Educator. This is Teacher Jeff. I'm an educator and an engineer by profession. And today we will discuss Chapter 3. And Chapter 3 is all about related literature and studies. Now, in today's lesson, there are four key areas that I'm going to be highlighting right now. First, we have the importance, purposes, and functions of related literature and studies. Second, we will also be discussing the different characteristics of related literature and studies. Third, we have the different sources of related literature and studies. And finally, we will be able to know as well where to locate the sources of related literature and studies. Now, in order for us to get started, let us discuss the first key area of our lesson for today, which is the importance, purposes, and functions of related literature and studies. Now, under related literature, please be reminded that this is divided into three parts. First, we have the related readings. Second, we have the related literature. And finally, we have the related studies. Now, let us discuss them one by one in order for us to better understand each of them, starting with related readings. So, what is meant by related readings then? If we say related readings, these refer to the legal basis of the study. If I say legal basis of the study, what I mean about this is that there should be a direct or indirect implication to the government. When we say direct or indirect implication to the government, for example, if you are a civil engineering student conducting a research study and your study is all about a certain area or location that is a catch basin, so that is flooded every time it rains, then in the student's research study, the legal implication would be, let's say, for example, the student should coordinate with Pag-asa, or may it be to NDRRMC. Okay, so this is just one example of related readings. There should be a direct or indirect implication to the government's thrust. And aside from that, we also have what we call related literature. And related literature is composed of discussions of facts and principles to which the present study is related. So, in order for us to better understand this, let me give you an example. So, for instance, if the present study deals with drug addiction, then literature to be reviewed or surveyed should be composed of materials that deal with drug addiction as well. Now, these materials are usually printed and found in books, encyclopedias, professional journals. We have magazines, newspapers, and other publications. Now, these materials are classified into local materials and foreign materials. It is considered as a local material if the material is printed here in the Philippines, and it is considered as foreign if the materials are printed in other lands. On the other hand, if we see related studies, these are studies or inquiries or investigations already conducted to which the present proposed study is related or has some bearing or similarity. So they are usually unpublished materials such as manuscripts, thesis, and dissertations. So for related studies, like related literature, these are also classified into local and foreign. It is considered local if the inquiry was conducted here in the Philippines, and foreign if the inquiry was conducted in foreign lands. Now, you have to take note as well that a survey or review of related literature and studies is very important because such reviewed literature and studies serve as a foundation of the proposed study. Now, this is because related literature and studies actually guide the learners or the researchers themselves in pursuing the research venture. Now, reviewed literature and studies help or guide the researcher in the following ways. First, they help or guide the researcher in searching for or selecting a better research problem or topic. Now, this means that by reviewing related materials, a replication of a similar problem may be found better than the problem already chosen. So, what do we mean by replication then? Well, if we say replication, it is the study of a research problem which were already, or research problems which were already conducted but in another place. For example, there is one study that has already existed in the United States, but has not existed in the Philippines as of yet. So if you are a researcher from the Philippines who would like to do the same study, then that is what we call replication. Or if not, if you are from the Philippines and there is one study that has existed already in Manila, which has not existed as of yet in Cebu City. So, being a researcher from Cebu City, you can actually conduct same study, and that your respondents are respondents from Cebu City. So that's what we call replication. And second, they help the investigator understand his topic for research better. Okay, that is why we make sure that we find or we cite different sources that are related to our study, and so we can understand our research problem better. Now, reviewing related literature and studies may clarify vague points about our problem. And third, they ensure that there will be no duplication of other studies. When we say duplication, if an investigation already made is conducted again in the same locale using practically the same respondents. So, for example, you are a researcher, so you are conducting your research these days, okay? And you want to conduct a research about multi-sensory warning signals for event perception and safe driving on driver interface design. But you have found out that it already existed in your locality. So meaning to say, you are no longer able to do such a topic or research topic because it has already existed in the same locale where you are conducting your own research study. So that's what we call duplication already. So this is avoided if a survey of related literature and studies be made first. So number 4, they help and guide the researcher in locating more sources of related information. Now, this is because the bibliography of a study already conducted indicate references about similar studies. And number 5, that would be they help and guide the researchers in making the research design, especially in the formulation of specific questions to be researched on. So specific questions, these refer to our specific statement of the problem. For letter B, the formulation of assumptions and hypothesis, if there should be any. The formulation of conceptual framework as well. The selection and application of the methods of research. So what are going to be the methods of research that you're going to be employing in your research study? So there are many. And also the selection and application of sampling techniques as well. The selection and or preparation and validation of research instruments for gathering data. So there are a lot of research instruments as well that we can make use in gathering our data. And also the selection and application of statistical procedures, the analysis, organization, presentation, and interpretation of your data, the making of the summary of implications for the whole study, and finally, the formulation of the summary of findings, conclusions, and recommendations. And finally, the last importance, purpose, and function of RL and RS, that would be they help and guide the researcher in making comparison between his own findings with the findings of other researchers on similar studies, with the end in view of formulating generalizations or principles, which are the contributions of the study to the fund of knowledge. So in this case, the researchers would be guided in terms of comparing his own result to the results of the other researchers. Okay, so this ends our discussion to the first key area of our lesson. And moving on to our next key area, that would be the characteristics of related literature and studies. So, what are the different characteristics of related literature and studies then? Well, there are certain characteristics of related materials that make them of true value. Among these characteristics, first we have the surveyed materials must be as recent as possible. This is very vital because of the rapid social, economic, scientific, and technological changes. So, findings several years ago, let's say 5 years ago or 10 years ago, maybe, findings several years ago may be of little value, especially today, because of the fast changing lifestyle of the people. However, there are also exceptions. For example, we have treatises that deal on universals or things of more or less permanent nature may still be good today. Another, there are mathematical laws and formulas and statistical procedures that had been formulated a very long time ago, which are being used today as well, okay, with very little improvement. And this is also true with natural and physical laws because books on these, though written a long time ago, are still being cited today. Well, another exception would be when a comparison or contrast is to be made between the conditions of today and those of a remote past, say 10 or 20 years ago. So naturally, literature and studies about that remote past have to be surveyed and reviewed. And for the second characteristic, that would be materials reviewed must be objective and unbiased. So some materials, take note, are extremely or subtly one-sided. Okay, if you can notice, either political, religious, etc. Comparison with these materials cannot be made logically and validly. And so, for that matter, distorted generalizations may result. Now, we are trying to avoid this one. So, as much as possible, we should ensure that the materials being reviewed must be objective and unbiased. And number three characteristics, materials surveyed must be relevant to the study. So make sure that only materials that have some bearing or similarity to your research problem at hand should be reviewed. So you should no longer review those studies that have no direct bearing or impact to your own study. So only those which have bearing to your study. When I say bearing, they are somehow related. Okay. And number four, surveyed materials must have been based upon genuinely original and true facts or data to make them valid and reliable. Now, take note, there are cases where fictitious data are supplied just to complete a research report, either a thesis or a dissertation. Okay. So this is no longer new. This is no longer surprising because this usually happens many times, okay? But of course, this kind of deception is very hard to detect and prove because we don't have a system to prove this one, okay? So therefore, this is a real problem to honest researchers. So if you are someone conducting a survey, make sure that your materials should be based on factual information. And for number five, reviewed materials must not be too few nor too many. So, what do we mean by this? So, no, when we say not too few nor too many, they must only be sufficient enough to give insight into the research problem or to indicate the nature of the present investigation. Take note that the number may also depend upon the availability of related materials. Now, sometimes there is a paucity of such materials. So, what are the requirements then for an undergraduate thesis, for a master's thesis, and for a doctorate thesis? Now, ordinarily, from 10 to 15 related materials are needed for a master's thesis, and from 15 to 25 for a doctoral dissertation, depending upon their availability as well as their depth and length of discussion. And on the other hand, for an undergraduate thesis, from 5 to 10 may do. But take note, the numbers, however, are only suggestive and not imperative nor mandatory, meaning to say that it is still your professor's prerogative to increase the number of your citations or for your related literature and studies, or if your professor may stick to the average numbers. Okay, so these are only the average numbers observed from thesis and dissertations surveyed by this author. All right, so the next key area that we're going to be discussing right now, that would be the sources of related literature and studies. Now, the sources of related literature and studies may include the following. So we have, of course, books. These are very useful sources. We also have encyclopedias, almanacs, and other similar references. And aside from these, we also have articles published in professional journals, magazines, periodicals, newspapers, and other publications. So it can be printed articles or it can be a digital one. Okay. So we also have manuscripts, monographs, memoirs, speeches, letters, and diaries. We also have unpublished theses and dissertations, which you can actually see in your college library. So they have copies of unpublished theses and dissertations there. Also, we have the Constitution and laws and statutes of the land. And aside from that, we have bulletins, circulars, orders emanating from government offices and departments, especially from the Office of the President of the Philippines and also the Department of Education, Culture, and Sports. Also, you can make use of your sources of your related literature and studies through the records of your schools, may it be public or private, that's acceptable, especially reports of their activities. And aside from that, you can also make use of the reports from seminars, educational or otherwise. And also, we have official reports of all kinds, such as educational, social, economic, scientific, technological, political, etc., from the government and other entities. And finally, the last key area of our discussion today, that would be where to locate the sources of related literature. Now, generally, the sources of related literature and studies are located in the following places. So we have libraries. Like I said earlier, you can make use of the libraries from your school, either government, school, or private libraries, okay? It can be public libraries, private, or in your school. Also, we have government and private offices, the National Library, and the Library of the Department of Education, Culture, and Sports. So the last two, the National Library and the Library of the Department of Education, Culture, and Sports, these are specially rich depositories of related materials, particularly unpublished master's thesis and doctoral dissertations. All right, I think that's a good place to stop. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button for the latest updates. Thank you.